Hello grade 5s and welcome to your natural sciences lessons. My name is Mrs. Niverson and I have the pleasure of teaching you while you're at home. I know it's weird having lessons being given to you through a computer. It's also very strange teaching to a computer, but there are some lovely benefits to it as well. You can eat in my classes and not get into trouble. You can talk to whoever you wish to because I can't hear you. And best of all, there's no need to wear a uniform. You can sit in your pajamas if you wish to and enjoy. But we're going to have some great fun learning some science together over the next few days, maybe weeks, we don't know. But let's get started. So I'm going to start this science lesson the same way I start most of my science teaching if you were children in my actual classroom, which is to say to you, can you picture in your mind right now what a scientist looks like? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to do that. Have you all got an image in your mind of what you think of when I say the word scientist? And I've got a funny feeling you probably picture something that looks like this. The crazy scientist wearing the lab coat and working with test tubes often is a man with crazy hair that is usually not brushed and goggles or glasses of some kind. Am I right? Is that what you pictured? Well, I'm here to actually tell you that not all scientists look like this. Some, yes, but not all. In fact, you're more than likely to find scientists today looking something like this. This lady is called Jane Goodall, and she is famous for her study and protection of wild chimpanzees. Her field of science is called zoology, and I'm sure that when she was in grade 5, she started her interest in the natural world in her natural science lessons. And today we're going to follow in her footsteps. We're going to start looking at classes of animals and how to classify them. Now, you may have done this already in class last term. You may not have. It's okay. If this is new information, I'm very, very privileged to be giving it to you. If it is something you're revising, every teacher will tell you that revision of key concepts, no matter what subject you're doing, is crucial. So let's now look at our learning targets for today. What are we going to learn today? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at and understand that animals are either separated into one of two categories, they being vertebrates or invertebrates. And we are also going to focus on identifying the 5 groups of vertebrates by their unique characteristics. Now, in every science lesson, just like in any other subject, there is a whole lot of new words that we're going to learn. Scientific vocabulary is very important because it means that you can express your understanding in a scientific manner. Here are a list of 6 words that we will be focusing on today and that I will use over the course of this lesson. If you know them, fabulous, well done. If you don't, then it may be at home when this is all finished, you could take some time in the next couple of weeks to create yourself a scientific dictionary, listing all the terms and new words that you're learning in my lessons. So here are the ones we're going to be working with today: vertebrates, invertebrates, classification, species, characteristics, and classes. And I don't mean classes as in where you have your lessons. Now, the animal kingdom is divided into 2 groups. Those groups are invertebrates or vertebrates. And all animals that are vertebrates have one very special thing in common. And this is that one thing. Now, do you know what that is? That's right. It is your backbone, or scientifically, we may call it a spine. Now, the word vertebrates, if I get my highlighter up here, if you give me 1 second. There we go. The word vertebrates. Oh, no, that didn't work. Let me try again. There we go. The word vertebrates comes from vertebrae, and that refers to each one of these little joints that make up your spine. So that should help you remember that if you are wondering what a vertebrate is, it is an animal that has a spine. So we separate them, animals that is, into vertebrates and invertebrates. Now, invertebrates we are going to study a little bit more in detail tomorrow. So you can look at this side of the diagram if you wish, but we're not going to touch on them at all today. We are only focusing on this side. So once we have our vertebrates separated from our invertebrates, we then break them down even further into 5 subcategories: mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. And what we are going to do today is learn what makes each of these classes of animals special and unique. So have a little look at these mammals that I've got pictured for you here. Each of them are very different. In fact, it's often easy, as it is with most things in life, to focus on your differences or the differences you see rather than the similarities people have or animals have in this case. I have got certain animals or certain mammals, should I say, here that fly. Some that live in herds. Some that climb trees. Some that eat meat. Others that eat only vegetation. And some that live under the water. In fact, mammals have conquered more habitats than any other family of vertebrates. But as I said, it is very easy to spot their differences and a little bit harder to spot what they have in common. So I'm going to pull out my answer box now, which tells us what all these mammals have in common. And it's probably quite useful that you can see me in the bottom of your screen right now, because you'll soon find that yes, as humans, we also are part of the mammal family. So all mammals have hair or fur. Even whales and dolphins that live under the water have very, very fine layers of hair on their skins. Sounds strange, but it is true. All mammals give birth to live babies. They don't lay eggs, such as birds or fish. They have live young, and they often nurture their young for a little while in infancy as well. They produce milk with which to feed their young. We are warm-blooded creatures. Everyone on this screen is warm-blooded. And that's important. It probably links quite nicely to why we have hair or fur, because we need that layer on our skin to help insulate the heat that is being generated from within our bodies. And we breathe with lungs. Now, as with everything in life, there are always exceptions to the rule, and there is one mammal known that I know of that does not give birth to live young and actually lays eggs. Now, I'm going to leave that with you and as a question for homework. And what I will do in my next lesson is I'll start by answering that and seeing if you got it right. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go home tonight and see, or go home tonight, you're already at home, but when you're at home, see if you can research online or in a book, what is the one mammal that does not give birth to live young? Okay, so moving on from the mammals, let's head over to the fish. Now, there are over 30,000 known species of fish. In fact, more are being discovered all the time. I've put in there, just so you know, my daughter's favourite cartoon at the moment, and since she's been at home and off school as well, this has kind of been on repeat in my house. She is only 4 though. So most of these fish, although they may look very strange as this little guy over here does, they're the ones we have discovered. There are scientists are still discovering more and more every day, and that's because the ocean is so deep that in certain parts we can't reach it yet. And there are other creatures such as jellyfish or crayfish that have fish in the title but aren't actually fish. So what does make a fish a fish? Well, it's these 4 things. All of the fish breathe with gills. They lay eggs. They're cold-blooded, and most of them have scales. Now, I thought you'd actually at this point like to hear some fun facts about fish that I found when I was researching for this lesson. I'm going to pull my fish across and you can see the whale shark is actually the largest fish on the earth. Some of them can grow up to 40 feet in length. To you, that's about 12 meters. That's a very, very long fish. And even this picture, you can see that that's one grown human man, and it only takes up the span of the whale shark's head. As I said earlier, there are over 30,000 known species of fish, and there are more fish than any other class of vertebrate put together. And finally, and one of my favorite things I learned, is that the ugliest animal on the planet has been named a fish. It's the blobfish, and I've put a picture here for you to see, and it's a shame. It is rather ugly, isn't it? And now we move on to the wonderful world of birds. Scientists believe that birds have evolved from dinosaurs, and when you look at something like the ostrich, it's very easy to see why they think that. The chicken is the most common bird found on the planet. You find them in most countries in various shapes and sizes. And although the ostrich and the penguin are flightless birds that live in Africa and Antarctica, there is also a flightless bird that originates from New Zealand. And there's my second question for you to do when this lesson finishes. Can you find out the name of the flightless bird that comes from New Zealand? And I will tell you what that is at the beginning of tomorrow's lesson. The hummingbird actually is one of the only birds that can fly backwards, and this little guy is called the bee hummingbird. They are the smallest bird in the bird kingdom. I think they grow up to about 5 centimeters when they're fully grown, which is probably roughly the size of my thumb, so they are incredibly small. But let's look at what birds have in common. All birds have feathers, but not all of them can fly. Remember that, that's important. As we said, the ostrich can't fly, the penguin can't fly, and that one bird I'm asking you to research for me also can't fly. They are warm-blooded, just like mammals. So whereas mammals have fur or hair covering their bodies, birds have feathers, which they use to insulate them and keep their body heat. They lay eggs and they breathe with lungs. So all birds meet those criteria. So now we've had a little look at the birds. Let's move to our last two classes of animals. Now I've put these two together because they are the two classes that often get mixed up. Now let's start with our reptiles. What do all these reptiles have in common? Well, reptiles have dry, scaly skin. It's often a very common misconception that they're slimy. People go, "Ooh, snakes are slimy." They're not. They've got very dry skin. They're cold-blooded. Now that's important. That means that they get their heat for their bodies from their surroundings. You'll often see crocodiles basking in the sunshine, or snakes lying on hot rocks in the early morning, warming up and getting their energy from the world outside of them. Whereas warm-blooded creatures, we generate our heat inside our bodies. They breathe with lungs and they lay eggs. So what makes them different from the amphibians? Well, the word amphibian here actually comes from Greek, and the Greek meaning for amphibians means they are from both lives. And that should give you a clue as to why amphibians are very special. Because they are of both lives, what it means is they're actually halfway almost between a fish and a reptile, in that amphibians hatch from eggs laid underwater or in water, and they start their lives looking very similar to fish. They grow underwater where they have gills and tails and swim, and as they grow up they shed those tails, they develop lungs, and they scramble out onto dry land, and that is why they are of both lives. So if I bring across the amphibian section and pull up slightly so you can compare it to the reptiles, you'll see amphibians, like reptiles, are cold-blooded. They breathe through both lungs and gills. So when they are young, they have gills, and as they grow, they develop lungs. Just like reptiles, they also lay eggs, and they live on both land and in water. Now, this actually makes amphibians especially vulnerable. Not only are they quite small generally compared to other animals, but because they rely on water or being close to water for most of their lives, they're also incredibly affected by pollution and habitat destruction. So because amphibians and reptiles are often confused, I thought I'd play a very quick little game with you. I want you to have a little look at the 4 creatures I have at the top of the screen. They are either a reptile or an amphibian. Have a little think about which is which, and then in a second I'll reveal. Okay, let's give this a go. Up here on the top we have a leopard toad. They are an amphibian. They are born, can't really say born, I suppose. If they come out of eggs, hatched is a better word. So they hatch out of water, eggs underwater, and start their lives as tadpoles. The next creature on my list here, sometimes referred to as the man-eating python because they grow so large, is a snake and therefore a reptile. Often confused about being slimy, but not. Next one on the list is a kimono dragon. They very much do look like dragons that you would see in a fairy story. So those are reptiles. And lastly, this little guy here, I hope you can see him underneath my picture. He is a newt, and newts are amphibians. So now we've looked at what makes each animal class unique. How we can classify them is by using a diagram such as this. Now, I call this a tree diagram because it very much does resemble a tree if you imagine that this is the trunk and that every arrow takes it off onto a different branch. Now, what I want you to do is have a little look and see if you follow the branches down and read the descriptions underneath, if you can decide what class of animal belongs in the white boxes at the bottom. And then I'm going to use my special magnifying glass to reveal what they are. So have a little second to do that. All right, let's start. If we look at a vertebrate that is warm-blooded and breathes with lungs and has hair, I should have also probably written or fur there, you should know that that is a mammal. Whereas a warm-blooded vertebrate that breathes with lungs where its body is covered with feathers is obviously a bird. Remember that hair or fur or feathers are very important for warm-blooded creatures because it insulates them and retains their body heat. So we come over to the cold-blooded vertebrates, and I want to know which one breathes with lungs. They are my reptiles. Which ones breathe with gills? They are my fish. And finally, which ones are of both worlds and breathe when they're young with gills and when they're older with lungs? They are my amphibians. So now to end the lesson, I thought it'd be fun to play a little game. Now, if I was in the classroom, I would split my class into 2 teams. So this will have 2 teams on either side, one here and one here. But don't you worry, we're just going to spin the wheel and answer the questions all together. So I spin the wheel, and what question will we land on? All animals can be divided into 2 groups. Are those 2 groups A, vertebrates and invertebrates, B, flowering or non-flowering, or C, reptiles or mammals? That's right, it's A, vertebrates and invertebrates. If we were flowering or non-flowering, we would be plants. Let's take another spin of the wheel. Okay, now this question is worth double the points because I landed on a ×2. Reptiles have slimy skin. True or false? Well done if you said false. You get an extra 100 points for that. No, reptiles have dry, scaly skin. Let's take another spin. All birds have nests and fly. True or false? Easy one, this one. We've said it a few times. No, not all birds fly and not all lay nests. Lay their eggs in nests, should I say. Penguins in the Antarctic don't do that. They carry their eggs on their feet to keep them from touching the cold ground. Elephants belong to which class of vertebrate? Birds, reptiles, or mammals? Well done if you chose C. That's right, they are mammals. They give birth to live young. They feed their babies milk. They have lungs, and they are covered in very, very fine hair. If you've ever been lucky enough to touch an elephant, you'll feel actually they're very hairy. Amphibians in their infancy have gills and grow lungs. True or false? That's right, it's true. They are of both worlds, remember? And the last question for today. Which of these pair of animal classes are warm-blooded? Birds and mammals, mammals and amphibians, or fish and birds? And the answer is birds and mammals. Well done. So, I'm going to leave you now for our lesson today, and I'm going to leave you with a couple of things to do. I would like to see if you can answer the following questions that I've put to you throughout this lesson. Number 1, what is the name of the mammal that doesn't give birth to live young? Can you find the name of the flightless bird that lives in New Zealand? And I wonder if out of all of those creatures you can tell me what the deadliest creature in the world is. And finally, you might want to think about starting that natural science dictionary. But before I go, don't forget, you can log on to WorksheetCloud.com, and up on there, I've loaded for you a worksheet recapping all the things about animals that we've covered today. Now, there are some questions on there that you'll find are about invertebrates, which will be our lesson tomorrow. So you can just leave those ones out if you don't know the answers. All the best of luck, and thank you so much. I look forward to working with you tomorrow.